What's up, boys?
I'm working on welding in the main cage. I had to cut the tacks, drop the cage so that I could weld around the top of the forehead bar and the back stays and the main hoop where the half laterals connect. So I dropped that. I'll be honest, it was quite difficult because by building my own cage, I've made it a little bit of luck, but I've made it so tight and precise that like you can't even put a finger through between the main hoop and the door, the chassis basically. So, which is great, but it makes it difficult when you have the main structure and you need to drop it off of the base plates, at least for a BMW. It looked like a 240 I've seen is maybe a little easier. I could be wrong. It's an S13 240, I think, is a little easier than the BMW. But I was able to do it, kind of finagled the cage, welded around the tops, and now I've got the cage back up and I'm welding it back into place so that we can move on to the door bars and our dash bar and basically all the bracing in between the main hoop. A couple things we're working on right now. As I'm finishing this roll cage and finishing welds in certain spots, I'm starting to paint the roll cage with the Steel-It Gray paint, which is what I'm going to use. It will seal the material, prevent it from rusting, and it just, it's a good finished look that I want to have. So this way, all the bare metal that I've welded, I'll spray it with this, seal it in good so it doesn't rust. Obviously, you want to do that whenever the metal is cool. You don't want to do it right after you weld because it'll just burn the paint. So I've let it cool down a little bit. I'm going to start painting some of these spots, and then I'm also going to show you where I've started to tape off some of the car for things that I don't want to get caught with overspray. When you're spraying and painting, I'm just using basically a rattle can in here. So I want to make sure I paint what I want to be painted and not anything else. You can see we've got some of the gray paint. It looks very clean. Taping off some of the sections. I'm preparing to do the door bars here. It'll be 2 bends in the material to go perfectly with our roll cage there to the front of the hoop, or I'm sorry, front of the half lateral. Finished up some welds back there. Starting to spray paint some of the corners where I've welded. So we're gonna keep, something else I'm working on. I'm working on the diagonal brace in the rear. I've got some string tied where I want that tube to be. I'll pull it tight, and then I can use my angle finder to determine what the notch needs to be in that corner there and down here at the bottom. So that we can get that piece made, mocked up. Starting on the door bars, this is the lower passenger side door bar I'm going to start with. They should be symmetrical on both sides. You want them to be symmetrical. So I've got my bar here. I'm going to start at a length of 51 inches, I think it was. I'm going to start measuring where I want my bends to start. I do need, on the BMW and my roll cage, I need it to bend starting at the seat, the rear of the seat. It needs to bend out towards the car, towards the door, run along the door panel, and then bend right back in to the front roll cage bar there. So we're going to figure this out, get our spots marked out, and then we'll start bending our tube. This is fitting really nicely. I've got about a 20-degree bend on the front here, and you can see it's running perfectly along the side of the chassis here. And then I've got about a 10-degree bend, perfectly, resting right across the panel there, and then vents right into our main hoop. So I gotta trim a little bit more on this notch, on the lower notch there, to get it to drop down about an inch, maybe inch and a half, and then it should rest perfectly right where we want it. So it's looking really good. So you can see a little bit of gap there, but once I cut that down a little more, it should drop perfectly level right where we want it. As you can probably guess or see in other videos I've done, but I use the tape to mark out where I'm going to start the bend. And then that way I put the tubing in the bender right up to the tape mark. And that's the measurement that I took from my center line, so that I know, you know, approximately where this bend's going to start. It's about 3.5 inches back on my 7-inch radius die. So that's how I do it, and it works out pretty good. So just also, side note, whenever I put this tape on here, I'll always mark, you know, what's the rear bend, what's the front of the piece. I'll mark out the top, like the top side of where I'll bend the tubing. I mark it at the rear, I mark it at the front, and then on this piece, since it's, you know, bending in towards the center of the car, you just rotate the piece and it perfectly works out. So another, I guess just to reiterate, is I started this bend about 20, but I was thinking I'd need to go to 25 or 26 degrees. So I started at 20, and I'm glad I did. If I'd have gone 26 inches, it would have gone too much, and it would have been basically a wasted piece. In the back, I started at a 5-degree bend, and it wasn't enough, so then I increased it to a 10-degree bend, and it's perfect. So always start small, because you can't go backwards.
So when I get you, girl, why did I have to